Hey, I'm Liamith,
My name is Jay, and welcome to the Medical Frontier.
where we talk about today's inventions, which are tomorrow's standard of care.
In this episode, we're going to be discussing new technology that's been implemented and approved by the FDA to manage diabetes and to help people that are dealing with conditions like diabetes type 1. And so we wanted to choose this topic because I guess you could kind of say this is a sequel to our previous episode that we did about Planety, since diabetes is directly relevant to um, the topic that we talked about in that video. But why we chose this video is that diabetes is such a massively climbing impact on the world to many of us in the population. Um, People suggest that, or people say that it's going to rise to approximately 700 million people worldwide before 2045, which is rising at dramatic levels, and it can't be good for us, to say the least. So the main thing about diabetes is that there's two types: type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. And when we talk about diabetes, type 2 is more common, and that's usually what people refer to when they say diabetes, because like around 95% of all diabetes cases are type 2. But the difference is that type 1 diabetes, our pancreas, which is an organ in our abdomen, is not producing insulin. So the beta cells in our pancreas, they are being attacked by our immune system. So it is kind of an autoimmune disorder, and diabetes is chronic, by the way. So once you get it, it is basically a lifelong condition. So the beta cells are being attacked by the immune system, and they can't produce enough insulin for glucose to be targeted into target cells and to be used by the cells to metabolize. So that's why type 1 diabetes is like that, and it's categorized by early onset. So many people, you can detect it when they're born, since it is more likely to be genetic. And when we talk about type 2 diabetes, the amount of insulin is good. The beta cells are producing insulin at a good level, but the problem is that the receptors of the cells, they are not functioning properly, or the cell signaling inside the cell, that mechanism is not working properly. So the glucose has no other way or option but to return back to the blood, and that is how diabetes is measured for the amount of sugar in your blood. So, Liam, if you want to tell us a little bit about how the pancreas works?
Yeah, so with that, thank you for that great explanation. So there's two parts of the pancreas, and the pancreas is part of both the endocrine and the digestive system. So the exocrine pancreas produces enzymes to help digest food and particularly protein. However, the endocrine pancreas makes insulin, which manages blood sugar levels, like Jay went into. And to go into this, to talk about what's kind of the new part of the new technology that's combating this of the artificial pancreas, is there's a continuous glucose monitor which tracks blood glucose levels every few minutes using a tiny sensor that's inserted under the skin. The sensor wirelessly sends the information to a program stored on a smartphone or on an insulin infusion pump. So it's basically just managing the blood sugar levels for these diabetic patients in order to enable better treatment of care.
Yeah, so there's two different types of pumps that can be used for this. One of them is actually outside of your skin, and the other one is inside of the skin. But both of them, they regulate how much insulin is pumped into your body based on what the continuous glucose monitor is measuring. And so what happens is that once a person intakes a carbohydrate rich meal, the healthy pancreas is supposed to detect all of that and detect how much glucagon and all of that is going to the liver to help metabolize those sugars. But with someone that has diabetes, their pancreas, like I said, isn't functioning well, or the cells, the target cells, and the receptors are not functioning well. So this artificial or bionic pancreas has to be working. And when we look at those two different types of pumps, they both do the same function, essentially, of both pumping in insulin, and the only difference is that one of them is outside the skin and one of them is inside the skin. But the new technology is that all of this is automated now. So before, we had to continuously track how much carbohydrates we're eating or consuming, and when to exactly pump in insulin, because the pancreas isn't doing its job of detecting when blood sugar levels are low and whatnot. So, Liamith, what are some reasons why diabetes might be becoming so prevalent, you think?
Yeah, I think as we talked about with plenty and the obesity crisis, if you want to go into some of the factors which cause diabetes a little bit more, I think that would have a great explanation for what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to point out that I don't think we hit on in that episode is that when we look at, fast food and all of these brightly colored like wrappers and whatnot, I think it's really targeted for the kids, like especially in schools. Like if you look at the meals we're eating or the types of snacks that we consume more and more, like there's processed
Mm-hmm.
sugars, candy bars, chips, sodas, and vending machine items and stuff like that. All of that is targeted towards us when we look at like schools and other places where a
Mm-hmm.
lot of kids normally are, like parks and things like that. So I think a lot of the problem is actually arising when we look at how the food is being targeted and the types of food and what's actually in the food. Because when the brain recognizes, something that's tasty or is high in sugar, your brain wants more and more of it because it releases dopamine. So when you are attracted to that or want more and more of that, your brain is going to keep telling you to go and get that. But that's just human nature. We can't control
Right.
how that it works, and it's just the thing we can control though is how we're managing ourselves and trying not to let
Mm-hmm.
those triggers affect us too much.
Yeah, you bring up a great point with the fact that it's targeted towards the youth a lot. And as we talked about with plenty and the obesity crisis, a lot of this stems from developing habits at a young age that are preventable and stuff that's going to long term be detrimental to their health. And I think that's why there's also been steps at least being attempted to be taken by the government. I mean, as we all know, sitting in the lunch lines, you have to get one vegetable, otherwise you can't leave the lunch line or can't get your meal. But stuff like that. And then I even remember, like, way back when I was in elementary school, about 10 plus years ago, they had the food pyramid
Mm-hmm.
and the food plate on the walls in the cafeteria to try and educate kids, to let them know that you have to be eating healthy food. But I think even since then, just the processing of food has been just exponentially skyrocketed, and there's so many new snacks coming out and stuff like that, that's like, oh, like, it's quick, easy, simple, convenient. It's the same thing with fast food, stuff that takes time to be prepared and stuff that takes time to, like, cook, and like it requires a lot of preparation and is only good for a short amount of time and is more expensive majority of the time, is the healthier option. And I think it's because, like, a convenience thing, and also like people who don't have time, like if I'm working a job and I have to drop my kid off to school and I forget to get them lunch, like the easiest thing is to get a processed lunchables from the grocery store on the way to school. So it's like certain habits like that, and taking the time out of people's day to make proper meals and to be able to prevent things like this and things like diabetes, because this is something that's a chronic condition. You can't go back once you've damaged your health. There's only so much that you can do to get it back, like you only have one body, so if you do something to it, you're going to have to face the consequences.
Exactly.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think what had one of the biggest impacts for me personally is when we watched the documentary by Morgan Spurlock, Super Size Me in sixth grade. I think they still might be showing kids that now in school. But Liamith, I believe you watched it too. Probably they definitely showed that to you in school as well, right?
I think I vaguely have an idea. I remember something else that we used to watch. It was something, I think his name was Jamie. I forgot his last name, but it was something along the lines of food and about going into fast food places, and they would go behind the scenes and see how all this stuff was like created, and it would lead to a lot of people being pushing away from that convenience of food and
Exactly.
whatever the food was.
Exactly. But that movie or the documentary, it shows like a great perspective of why this is becoming such a big problem in the United States. But to be honest, I would generalize it to the world too. I wouldn't only say it's the United States where this is a problem. In a lot of developing countries, I guess you could also generalize this too, saying that diabetes or kids getting more and more obese is a big problem because I was looking at an interesting statistic. I think it said that when we look at the 1980s to now, the number of people that have diabetes has actually quadrupled from around 108 million to around more than 460 million now in 2020 approximately. So the numbers at which it's rising are just dramatic, and something
Yeah.
needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point is even with the diabetes getting quadrupled, like there was a statistics that I saw, but usually the those who are below the poverty line, they're classified as underweight due to lack of food, but now anybody who's below the poverty line, majority of them are overweight
Hmm.
because they're not able to afford good food and are being forced to resort to fast food and all these cheaper options which are unhealthy
Hmm.
and which also increase the risk of obesity. And by no means is obesity the sole cause for diabetes. There is a huge part of there's a huge genetic factor involved and different things that everybody's body is different. So
Yeah.
some people can handle the blood sugar, some people can't. And everybody's body reacts differently to things. But this is just some things that we can do to prevent diabetes because this is the only way to prevent diabetes. This is the only cause that is not that we have control over because you can't control your genetic makeup. You can't control how your body reacts to things. You can just control what amount of sugar and the food that you're putting into your body.
Exactly.
Um, so yeah.
And I think it's important, or that's a good segue to note that why diabetes type 2 is more common is because this is the type of diabetes that's more relevant to unhealthy lifestyles, unhealthy diet, because the more and more sugar you're putting into your body, the more your cells are being acclimated to that and they're being adapted to that. So when you take like a normal amount of sugar that's not, over bombarded by what you normally eat, your cells kind of don't react to it as much. So you need more and more of the insulin to get that same effect, that healthy effect that should naturally be happening to your cells. So, yeah, it's important to point out that type 2 is more impactful for that reason. And Liamith, why do you think the bionic pancreas is more beneficial?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, some benefits of the artificial pancreas, right? Um, it may help those with type 1 diabetes reach their target blood glucose levels and improve their quality of life. Again, in healthcare, all we're trying to do is improve the quality of life and make sure that the patient is able to do their day-to-day tasks without getting affected. And I think this is a great example of being able to do that and being able to alleviate some of the stress that is done without it being automated, right? With having that mobile app too, that's a huge plus to have that on your phone and to be able to visually see instead of, I'm not entirely sure how those pumps work, but I do believe the like reader or the level is on the pump itself and it's not in your phone. And so with the artificial pancreas system, your blood glucose levels are monitored continuously, right? So that's a huge, huge plus, especially with those with diabetes. That's something that's really, really important. And the other really good thing about this is that the computer program improves the control of blood glucose by automatically adjusting the amount of insulin it delivers to make sure your blood glucose levels are in range, right? So the system like helps you avoid hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia, and doctors can monitor the insulin doses remotely and recommend dosage adjustments for like those who need closer supervision and those who have an increased condition and a more at-risk condition.
Okay.
And parents or guardians for kids can also monitor the blood glucose levels of their kids from their own smartphones throughout the day and the night, right?
Mhm.
So like if my kid is at school and I want to make sure that he or she is okay, I just check my phone and I'm able to see that. And especially with diabetic patients and being able to provide that sense of comfort for parents especially, I think is a huge, huge plus.
Yeah. Yeah. And while this device is really beneficial to people that are unfortunately having to go through type 1 diabetes, there are also some limits to it, and some of them include how you always have to maintain it. So, for example, you always have to make sure that the pumps and the actual system, like the monitor, is in the right place. that it's not getting shifted around anywhere. And sometimes, like the pumps where it's attached to on your skin, sometimes that can cause irritation or redness, or sometimes people that have more sensitive skin, they can have itchiness. And another thing is that um, you have to always enter the amount of carbohydrates you ate or consumed after the meal you just ate. So there's also a manual section that you have to manually input saying how much carbohydrates you just ate in your meal. So that might bring some inconvenience in having to calculate how much you ate, how much carbohydrates that contains, and whatnot. But in general, I would say this is a really, really beneficial device for anyone that's going through type 1 diabetes. And Dr. Sue Brown actually says that this is really good as well because, according to many of the American diabetes associations and things like that, a lot of people with type 1 diabetes are not actually meeting goals for glycemic outcomes. So devices like the artificial pancreas can definitely help them achieve those goals and put them on the right track to have healthier lives and lead healthier lifestyles.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, again, we were having that doctor testimonial as we always do, about how good this product is and about how good this device is. I think, especially with the development of technology, I think the fact that it's just automated is a huge plus, and just having that monitoring, being able to implement your phone into the healthcare field and being able to have real-time device or like real-time data with something such as blood glucose levels from like just like a different type of health monitoring. I think that's really unique and really, really cool that we were able to get there with this technology.
Exactly. Just the fact that you can detect how much glucose is in your blood, like from your phone, whether it being an app or this little monitor that you have next to you, is just it's just revolutionary. There's no other way to put it. Like imagine,
Yeah.
like I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, telling someone you can, directly see the amount of glucose that's being pumped around your body. It's just technology is
And
always
then
going to be
pump
there.
insulin in too.
Exactly, and pump insulin too. All of this being automated as well. So it's incredible to see how technology is impacting the healthcare world, and that's the main basis of what we'd like to focus on this channel. So this episode was really informative for us. We hope it was informative for you guys as well. And yeah, Liam, if you have anything to say.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to drop a comment about anything that you want us to discuss going forward. We will continue to get as many episodes before the summer comes to an end as we can. And yeah, we hope you guys have a great day, and thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you all.